Constitution.
All right, we got to get okay, let's start our countdown. Mr. Duke Lowry?
Oh, Mr. Rex, I am doing just lovely this fine Monday.
Good. Well, let's get the technical stuff out of the way. Can you see and hear okay so far?
I hear you just fine, but looks like we're still working through a little bit of technical glitches. I have a froze screen, but I think that's because I was trying to manipulate some documents while we were getting started.
All right. Yeah, so that hopefully might just be on your end and not on the main side here. I'm kind of watching with, just so everybody knows, and Duke, just so you know, there's about a 15 or 20-second delay as we're talking before it hits Facebook, kind of like in TV or radio where they have a delay. So I'm just kind of watching here, and so far it looks pretty good. How do you like the new graphics?
I love it. I'll tell you, that is pretty sharp. Yeah, I know you spent a little time situating that right there to make us look more professional. Somebody sent me an email and said we needed to get matching shirts. I don't know about that, but
Well, yeah, I'm in the solid black, I guess, Johnny Cash thing or whatever I'm doing. I don't know, but yeah, if somebody wants to donate, hey, we'll buy matching shirts, no problem.
yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, you have anything to report new this week, or do we want to go to the intros for anybody who may be joining new this week? Tell them
Well,
about ourselves, or
let's kind of do the intros real quick. I guess I'll start off. So I'm Rex Moncrief. I'm an IT guy. I like to bass fish, and of course I'm interested in politics. Long story made short. I've been in politics for a long time, but I don't remember. It was what, 8, 10 years ago maybe? I can't remember. My good friend here, Duke Lowry, convinced me to get even further into politics, and that has led through many things, including the Bossier Republican Executive Committee, the Board of Election Supervisors, and finally to Bossier Watch, which is social media keeping an eye on Bossier with kind of a political bent, obviously. So, Duke, why don't you introduce yourself too?
yeah, in the previous shows, I've described myself as just being a local guy, lifelong resident of Bossier, concerned about our community, and someone as well emailed me and said, you're a little more than that. You need to be a little more forthcoming. Okay, I'll admit I am a moth to the flame as well when it comes to politics. Been on the Republican State Central Committee for quite a while, probably I guess 2 terms. Been on the Bossier Parish Republican Executive Committee. Was the vice chairman last year. I'm on it again now. And incidentally, I was a delegate to the Republican National Convention for the last 3 national conventions. And I'm kind of proud of that because the last 2 conventions have been a Trump delegate. And the 2016 convention was where the Republican Party drafted the most conservative platform in the history of the party. So there, to appease a little bit of the criticism, I gave my political background.
There you go. And it's a pretty good political background. There's no doubt about that. You mentioned, of course, being a Trump delegate. We're trying to keep this centered on obviously relating to Bossier, but, of course, we've got the national election, which has broad implications for Bossier and everything around here. I would like to say that the Registrar of Voters office, Stephanie and the girls up there, and Jill Sessions at the Clerk of Court's office have so far done a spectacular job. It seems like with the early voting in Bossier, like all the pictures and video I've seen on social media, like the lines are like around the block almost, but they're moving people through there who want to do the early voting.
Yeah, they're getting the job done, and I would suspect that elections in the future aren't going to become easier. They're going to increasingly become more difficult. I see us, just not locally, but as a country coming to a crossroads when it comes to our elections. Maybe our next guest will have some input on that subject. I'll throw out a little teaser, and we can, we kind of throw a curveball to every one of our guests, and I'm going to kind of bait this one up a little bit. I remember having lunch at a restaurant in Baton Rouge during one of the legislative sessions. I think we come down and lobbied on a bill or something, and Donald Trump was a kind of a funny subject, a funny issue. So we'll see what he has to say about that.
That's a pretty good teaser. So I don't really have that much new to report. I mean, there's some things going on with the Cypress Black Bayou deal, of course. The Attorney General's office has only retroactively approved the Ayers law firm as the counsel for the district, only retroactive back to 2016, not 2011 as they asked. And so that opens up some interesting rabbit holes that could go down. And in one of my videos I released a few days ago, I talked about $150,000 even number in this $3 million bond issue. And so I've pretty much figured out where that went. So I'll be releasing a video here probably in a couple of days to help explain that. But other than that, not too much new because we got the presidential election and the local races coming up.
Yeah, you know, we keep teasing about a lot of these little things, and I guess that at some point we're going to have to really take a deep dive and have a good discussion on those subjects, because I think folks really want to kind of dig into it a little more and hear a little more about those things.
I agree. Well, why don't we go ahead and see if we can bring in our next guest. So let's see if I can get him up on the screen, and we'll make sure his audio is good, and then we'll go ahead and let you introduce him. So, mystery guest, can you hear our audio?
Yeah, I can. I'm just messing with you.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, oh, great. Here we go again. All right. So, Duke, I'm going to throw the name tag under there, which we kind of teased a little bit at the beginning before I went to the countdown. But while I'm doing that, Duke, why don't you introduce our guest?
Well, this is a person who's been a friend of mine for a lot of years, and I'm trying to coach him a little bit currently on his fishing skills, and it's to be determined how that's going to turn out. But this individual, John Kay, is his name. Some of you may know him, some of you may not. I met John Kay a long time ago when he worked for Congressman John Fleming, and he moved on and ended up becoming, John, is it correct, the executive director of Louisiana for Americans for Prosperity?
State director. I was the state director for a little over 4 years. I was with the organization for about 6 years and 3 months.
Yeah, and you're not currently with them anymore, correct?
I'm not. I'm still in the political business, doing a lot of the same kind of work. But I chose to move on the end of March. I chose to take a new job in the middle of a pandemic, which has been interesting to say the least.
Yeah, and John, for a lot of you out there, John, if there was anything going on in Baton Rouge as far as legislatively, he was in the middle of it, and all issues as it pertains to Baton Rouge and how our legislative process goes. John is someone who is on top of it. And with that said, Rex and I thought, about you being the perfect guest to bring on because with so many constitutional amendments, a lot of folks have been sending emails and asking us questions about the different issues and how we needed to support. We thought, who better than to kind of break those down and from the perspective of a layperson where they needed to be on these things and the why of them. John, if you want to take a moment and describe yourself a little more than what we already have, that's fine, or we can dive right into it.
Yeah, I think we can probably go ahead and dive right in. I appreciate the introduction. I was skeptical 4 years ago that Donald Trump could get elected president, and then skeptical particularly who he would appoint to the Supreme Court if he were to get the opportunity to do so. I have been very pleasantly surprised at who he's appointed. I don't think I could have chosen better myself. I'm looking forward to voting for him on November the 3rd.
Do you recall if there was a gentleman's bet in a restaurant on the subject at hand here?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Senator, I do not recall.
Well, yeah. All right, I'll leave that one alone. We won't go any further, but I am going to address that hat you got on at some point. I can't tell if that's a Tiger hat or if that's like some kind of Jacksonville Jaguars or something, but we'll address that later.
All right. I'll tell you what it is when you ask.
All right. So Amendment 1, no right to abortion. From my perspective, it's kind of straightforward. If you're pro-life, you're going to be, I would think, for it. If you're not, you'd be against it. What can you elaborate on this bill? Was this, I've heard some people say that this was just another bill for the current legislators to, get an issue out there and get their name on record. What do you have to add on it?
Yeah, so this is the Love Life Amendment, and a lot of folks in Louisiana are supporting this. It is it's a failsafe of sorts if Roe versus Wade were to be overturned nationally. So right now in every state, abortion is legal thanks to Roe versus Wade. In some states, it's more restricted than others. Louisiana has done a good job of trying to restrict it as much as possible. The courts haven't ruled with us on everything, but they've done a pretty good job along the way. And they've made it fairly difficult to get an abortion in Louisiana, but it is still legal, and there are still a couple of clinics open. State law currently says that abortion in Louisiana is illegal if there wasn't a federal preemption on the subject. What this does is it's a constitutional failsafe. It keeps it in statute, but it moves it to the Constitution to where there would be no question what the voters of Louisiana desire when it comes to abortion, or the lack thereof in our case. A couple of other states, I think I read earlier today, 13 other states have had judges go rogue and rule that the Constitution, the right to privacy, et cetera, meant that you had a right to an abortion. And this is to essentially make it clear to judges, legislators, anyone in the future, that the Constitution of the state of Louisiana prohibits abortion. End of story.
Yeah, good deal. I guess that still wouldn't prevent a judge from trying to test the waters, but I would think that ultimately, once it got, say, to the Supreme Court, this would tamp that down, correct?
Yeah, I think a constitutional amendment keeps it to where someone can file suit, but I don't think they would ever make it to the Supreme Court. But it's a pretty clear amendment. It says very clearly what the state of Louisiana wants, what they desire, and it's going to be pretty difficult to find a way out.
I got a question, or Duke, let me kind of interject here for a second. So, John, I think this is a pretty good segue talking about doing this as a constitutional amendment, but maybe you could explain for the folks watching why having this as a constitutional amendment is better than just passing it as a statute.
Yeah, it's already passed as a statute. It's state law that abortion is illegal. The Constitution overrides statutes. So if there's a conflict between statute and the Constitution in Louisiana, for most places of the law, then you defer to the Constitution. Currently in the Constitution, it doesn't say that abortion is illegal in Louisiana. And what's happened in other states is taking provisions that grant you the right to privacy to say, there's no way we can stop you from having an abortion because we can't know what you are or aren't doing in the privacy of the operating room. So we can't intervene there. So what this does is clears that up. So it will exist in statute and in the Constitution if this passes. And I fully expect this one will pass.
Okay, cool.
Hey, guys, I just thought, and you'll have to forgive me. And one of our followers on our show sent an email, and they said that they were, they're not from Louisiana, they're from out of town, and they wanted us to kind of go over just, I guess you could say, the statutory regime and how our Constitution and state government and the organization, why is it that we get deluged with amendments, seems like every couple of years, and in which I know the answer to it, but I'm not as eloquent in explaining that. And John, I thought you would be great at maybe kind of just generally covering the overall process in our governance. And, as we get to the point of all these amendments and the technicality of them being poured on the voters every couple of years.
Yeah, so I think that it can probably be summed up in a couple of ways. The simplest way to discuss it is our Constitution isn't a set of principles like the national United States Constitution is. It's more or less a collection of statutes. We're going to be over 200 constitutional amendments likely after this election day. So our state constitution, for better or for worse, I would argue it's for worse, is not set up the same way as the United States Constitution, and that should be changed. We worked on it in the past. We're going to continue to work on it in the future. There needs to be a constitutional convention in Louisiana that changes the way that the state laws are structured. So as a result of that, in order to change certain things in Louisiana, the voters have to act upon those things. The other reason why is from time to time, legislators are, I find a better word. I can't find a better word than cowardly, and don't want to vote on an issue themselves. They want to defer to their constituents and allow them to have a say on what it is that they're voting on. Which sounds good in theory, but it kind of violates the spirit of a representative democracy and more or less reflects democracy, which isn't how we've structured our government on a national level and shouldn't be structured that way on a state level. As a result of that, once they make a bad constitutional amendment, and then sometimes we have to go back and vote on it again to clean it up because we can't clean it up without the voters if they use the voters to put it in the Constitution in the first place. So that's, I think, the easiest way and simplest way to sum it up. There's really two reasons why, and hopefully one day soon we can fix that.
Yeah, I think I had read somewhere that we had the most voluminous Constitution of any state in the country. Would you agree with that?
If it's not accurate, it's pretty close. But I think you're right.
And I think Rex and I were talking about it maybe the last show or something like that, that, a constitutional convention, that's almost impossible because, one side, they'll only want to do it if they're in control, and the other side is only going to want to do it if they're in control. So therefore, nobody's going to ever really agree to do it. The only way it'll ever happen is if one side, and I mean party affiliation, gets complete control and can control the outcome, right?
Yeah, there were a few different hangups this last go around at it. One of them was the legislature was controlled by Republicans, the governor's a Democrat, and how much say would he have over the process, whether it is him appointing delegates to the convention. If you could change the way you structure a convention when you issue the call and make it to where the governor can't appoint anyone, or he can appoint everyone if he wanted to. And then the other question is how vulnerable are delegates going to be if the governor calls them to his office and offers them something for their area, offers to support them for a race in the future. Not arguing that the governor would do anything illegal or inappropriate, but the governor of Louisiana has more power than any governor in the entire country. And if that's the case, then he has power he can wield in front of a delegate who's never held elective office before and might be impressed with the trappings of office.
So, John, correct me if I'm wrong, the last time that we had a constitutional convention was what, 74, is that correct?
It was in the 70s. I'm not sure the exact year.
Okay. And so obviously that's, what would that put it at, 30, almost 50 years ago. So it would take a pretty good effort to actually have another constitutional convention, even though a lot of people, on the right, conservative, Republican side have been kind of screaming for the, a constitutional convention in some circles. The medicine might be worse than what we've got right now. How do you feel about that?
It could be. I mean, there's a chance that delegates could go into the convention and go rogue and pass things that aren't palatable to the people of Louisiana. But there's a fail-safe on that as well. Once a convention is signed off on by delegates, the people of Louisiana have to vote on it. So, for instance, if they were to go into a convention that they were going to strip out our Second Amendment in Louisiana, sign off on it, and send it to the voters, then the voters could say, "Thanks, but no thanks. We're gonna go back to the old Constitution because at least we had the right to bear arms when we got one." So I think that it's taken care of to some degree. Sure, things could slip through that maybe we wouldn't prefer, but I think that at this day and age, everything is so public and so all over everyone's news feeds or timeline that I think people would catch that and maybe go against it if they were to go rogue on any of the major issues.
Okay, good.
Someone texted me some stats. I'm not sure where these come from or if they're accurate, but they said that from 1995 to 2019, there were 189 amendments, and 141 of them were voter approved. That was 75%, and 48 of them were defeated, being 25%. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I had never heard those numbers before.
So I guess we can jump on back off on the amendments for anyone who's keeping score on them and wants to follow along and make a decision on what you hear on these. Amendment number 2, the oil and gas well assessment amendment. I'm assuming, John, you're ready to jump off into that one.
I'm going to give it a go. It's actually an interesting amendment. The current law says that kind of leaves it open-ended for assessors and how they're going to assess a well, how they're going to tax the property of the well and what it's taking out of the ground. This isn't to be confused with a severance tax. It's very different than that. This is the property tax that's charged on a local level. Right now, state law is agnostic to whether or not a well is taking a lot or a little of oil out of the ground. What this would seek to do is to put rules in place that would specify how assessors can assess wells that are underperforming versus wells that are performing well. So you would still have to assess according to the replacement value of the well itself, but you would also be able to take into account whether or not the well is producing a lot or a little. What this seeks to do, and it's supported by the oil and gas industry, it's supported by a lot of folks across the state, is it seeks to redistribute the tax burden according to the value of the well, rather than kind of leaving it open-ended for assessors and how they want to assess the well. So this isn't really projected to make a whole lot of change to the bottom lines of local governments, but what it is projected to do is to spread the tax burden more equally based on the actual value of property, rather than the just basically charging everyone pretty much the same across the state, regardless of the performance of the well.
All right, so I'm going to kind of go down as you're discussing these and just put the little check box here. I'm on the voter portal site because obviously what's going to be on the ballot is not nearly as extensive necessarily as the entire amendment, and then of course what John's discussing and what we're talking about here. So number 2 was a yes, number 1 was a yes that we would recommend. Want to move on to number 3?
Yeah, well, I want to follow up on number 2 with a question or two with John. So what you're saying is that local governments tax an existing well currently on the property value, but not necessarily on the property value, and let's say the equipment or what have you, but not necessarily on what's produced out of the well.
That's right.
I thought that the severance taxes, and I may be wrong, because I had gotten a question about it, and I wasn't completely clear. It is a little confusing that the severance taxes were the only taxes currently permitted on an oil and gas well. And I guess that's on the production end, correct?
Yeah, so you have on the state level, you have the severance tax that is applied to the taking of oil and gas out of the ground in Louisiana. On a local level, the parish level, you have an assessment on the value of the property. So that includes everything from what you're taking out of the ground to what you have above the ground or in the ground, taking it out of the ground. And to date, state law treated a good well the same as it's treated a bad well, which means you're paying the same tax on a well that's not producing anything as you are on a well that's producing a lot. And what this would seek to do is to change that to make it a more even playing field and I guess reflect what is actually happening in the oil economy.
So the severance tax rate won't change on what's coming out of the ground, correct?
That's right. It stays the same. There's no change to the severance tax at all.
So, but producers and oil and gas producers, I mean, and you know, if they're supporting it, I'm sure they look at it a whole lot deeper. But then you'll have local governments that I would argue would be able to tax more. Or am I looking at this wrong? And the reason I get that is because I know that in Louisiana, our tax rate is 12.6%, whereas in Texas, for example, it's 4.6%. You know, and that's a pretty big difference. And I'm wondering if is this going to be an increase?
In some wells, it probably will be an increase, but on wells that aren't producing, it'll be a cut. This is trying to come up with a better way to explain it. This is one of those that didn't really attract a whole lot or any opposition in Baton Rouge from either the people who are running for, or people who are in the legislature or people who are in the industry. It was widely adopted and worked towards by everyone, including the assessors. I think they've been working on this, I heard, for roughly 20 years, trying to come to a conclusion on how they were going to treat this and not punish people who have underperforming wells. And this is the compromise they ultimately came to, that they think that they could get off the ballot and get support of everyone. I guess the way to look at it is right now in state law, there's a lot of leeway for how assessors treat wells. What this would do is seek to slow that up a little bit and make sure they're treated the same way across the state, and that there are common rules across all parishes so that it makes sense. And assessors will have less leeway to go rogue and make decisions that might harm the oil and gas industry.
Gotcha. All right, Rex, if you want to move on to number 3.
Yeah, this one is, and I'm gonna switch screens here for a second because of course, the Caddo PEC or Republican Executive Committee put out their amendment guide, and so I didn't necessarily want to influence any of this, but they've got a nice explanation of some of these, and I think they'll probably pretty much correspond to your analysis too, John. And so number 3 is, do you support an amendment to allow for the use of the Budget Stabilization Fund, also known as the Rainy Day Fund, for state costs associated with a disaster declared by the federal government? So, John, do you want to kind of try to break that one down or simplify it a little bit?
Yeah, I think in theory, this is one of the things that told me what it was going to do. I would tell you that in theory, I agree. This is one of the devil in the details for me, and I think I'm going to vote no on this one, although I haven't fully made up my mind. Basically, what it does is it would take the rainy day fund, the budget stabilization fund, and it would add another reason why the legislature could take money out of it. And the spoken reason is essentially a cash flow problem. When a disaster hits Louisiana has to pay for the immediate recovery. And most of the time, they are reimbursed for that by the federal government. what this would do is say you don't have to take money from somewhere else, money that's planned to be spent in state government. You don't have to take it from a different department that's planning to use it and then replace it later on. It seeks to solve the cash flow problem. That sounds good in theory because it's prescribed that it will be replaced once the money comes back in. That requires a certain level of trust in the legislature and in elected officials in general. Not just this legislature. They haven't done a whole lot that would make me think that they would just abuse this power. But generally, people who hold power, I don't, and particularly purse strings, I don't prefer to give them more ways to spend tax dollars, particularly from a rainy day fund that in Louisiana has been drained and not really replenished. We used it a couple of years ago when we had one of the fiscal cliffs, and when it was found out later that year that we weren't actually going to have a fiscal cliff, they didn't put the money back into the rainy day fund. They spent the money. So rather than replacing it after they had a problem, they didn't replace the money. I can see this type of situation setting up again. So while I would like to say, yes, let's give them a way to manage cash flow a little bit easier, the two problems I have with that are, number one, the cash flow management issues have never been major in the past. And so I don't know that it warrants a constitutional amendment to change the rainy day fund. And number two, it's a trust issue for me. I just can't trust giving any legislature, any governor, more power to spend more money on more things in state government.
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100% on that. You were real nice and kind of politically correct about it. But yeah, I don't trust them at all. So, because they robbed from that fund before, and then we get into another budget shortfall and replenishing that fund, and then we have some kind of disaster emergency happen, and it just goes downhill from there. So I think I would tend to agree with the way that you seem to be leaning on it, which is I'm going to mark this one as a no for everybody that's watching. If I can get my deal to click here.
Rex, incidentally, how did the Caddo Peck, the Caddo Parish Republican Party, how did they fall on that issue?
They've got it as a no as well. I think, let me see if I can get this where everybody can see it. Yeah, so they've got amendment number 3 as a no as well, basically for the same reasons that John mentioned and talked about, because the fund it can already be tapped under current law, just like it was in Hurricane Katrina. And so, like you said, this is according to the Caddo Peck, and they've got some pretty good resources there, so I would trust this.
I would point out that the Louisiana GOP recommended no on this one as well.
All right, so we ready to move on to number 4, or do we have some more questions?
Yeah, I think we're ready to move on to 4. I would just say on number 3, I find that interesting that legislators should have tidied that up themselves. I don't see why that was made into a constitutional amendment. I would have thought they could have handled that. I'd be interested to know what the debate was in committee on that.
Yeah, they wanted to keep sticking their hand in the cookie jar, I'm sure, but that wouldn't be nice to say.
Just to tie a bow on it, I think that they couldn't handle it legislatively. If they were going to make this change, it had to be made constitutionally. It's one of those things that is in the Constitution. Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't be, but they couldn't change it without us saying so. So this is one of those instances where we can pull our reins a little bit.
Gotcha. Good.
All right. Do we, Duke, you want me to read 4? You want to read it? We're ready to move on, or what?
No, go ahead. For some reason, I think this one might be a favorite.
Okay. So I'll read it, and then, of course, we'll let John do the analysis of it. So it says, do you support an amendment to limit the growth of the expenditure limit for the state general fund and dedicated funds, and to remove the calculation of its growth factor from the Constitution?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to get probably a little bit wonky on this one. So when I'm done, ask me as many questions as you want. But I want to try to bring this back to a recent a recent occurrence in state government, so everyone will know exactly what it would mean to them, what it means to state spending. All right, so I'm gonna kind of dig in. So basically, right now in Louisiana, we don't have a spending limit. We do in word, but not in deed. The state budget this past year was, let's see, a little over 12. It was a little over $13 billion. I'm sorry, a little over $14 billion. This current fiscal year that we're in, they could have spent up to 18 billion and some change. So there's no way that they can raise that much in taxes on Louisianans to pay for it, because they don't have that much in the bank. They don't have that much coming in. So they would have to raise $4 billion in taxes. With the law of diminishing returns and everything kicking in, that's the equivalent to about 6 or 7 new sales tax pennies on a state level. So if your sales tax, state and local combined, is 10% right now, in order to cover a $4 billion increase, they would have had to raise the state sales tax to the total sales tax to 17 cents, 17%, which is, it would never work. We would all move away. It's too much. You can't live under those types of circumstances. So effectively, we have no spending limit in Louisiana. And it doesn't reset on a year-to-year basis. So it just continues to grow. So state government continues to grow, but at a smaller rate. The expenditure limit continues to grow at an astronomical rate because it's only governed by personal income. It's not governed by any other economic factors that normal economies should be governed by. Constitutional Amendment number 4 changes that, and it puts into state law 4 factors. It keeps personal income growth, which was the only factor before. It adds 3 additional factors that would make it would restrict state spending. And it doesn't stop state spending. It doesn't even stop the growth of state spending. What it does is it makes sure that state spending is attached to something in reality. So you keep personal income growth. This is how much money we're making. This is our salary increase or decrease. It takes into account the state's gross domestic product, what we're producing as a state. It takes into account the inflation rate changes in the southeastern region. And it takes into account the population change in the state of Louisiana. So it takes all those 4 things together, those 4 percentages, and it averages them up into 1%. So I can tell you what the percentage is, and I'm going to in a minute, but I want to do it by telling you a story about 2016. The 2016 fiscal year, you probably remember it. We had a sales tax increase to give Louisiana the highest sales tax rate in the entire country. We had an Airbnb tax increase, a rental car tax increase, a cell phone bill tax increase, more taxes on beer, more taxes on wine, more taxes on liquor, more taxes on cigarettes. I don't even think I named them all, but we had a lot more taxes to put in place. The justification, this is a headline I found earlier today from the Times-Picayune, was, and I quote, "Edwards and lawmakers raised taxes in order to avoid drastic cuts to government services, particularly higher ed and local hospitals." So it made me look at the numbers. The 2015-2016 fiscal year, the fiscal year that preceded this conversation we're talking about, was the last budget under Bobby Jindal. It was $12 billion. This is just state spending. So this doesn't take into account, this whole conversation, this amendment doesn't take into account the federal government dollars that come to Louisiana that we spend. It only takes into account state dollars. The last budget under Bobby Jindal was $12,333,756,499. The first budget under John Bell Edwards, this is the budget where most of those tax increases went into effect, was about $604 million bigger than Bobby Jindal's last budget. So from one year to the next, the state budget increased by $604 million. Now let me go back to that comment above. To avoid drastic cuts to government services. Since when is a $604 million increase? If you go shy of that, since when is $400 million a drastic cut? Of an increase, $400 million increase, is that a drastic cut? It's not. So what this was to fund the growth of state government to the tune of 4.9%. So state spending grew by 4.9% in Governor Edwards' first year. Now, You read the constitutional amendment, you see it's locked in at 5%. That's a 5% maximum that it's allowed to grow. The corresponding legislation that's in effect, if this is signed, puts those 4 factors into place. So that means that in 2016, 2017, when we grew by $604 million and they raised all those taxes, the state government should have only grown under that growth factor, should have only been allowed to grow by 1.65% that year based on the previous year's spending. So what that means is state government, instead of growing by $604 million, should have only grown at a maximum rate of $203 million. That's a $401 million savings to taxpayers if Amendment 4 had been in effect then. Now, that's why I'm supporting Constitutional Amendment number 4. It gives the people of Louisiana the ability to put in place. There's already an expenditure limit in the Constitution. It's not working, clearly. This gives us the ability to fix that, and it gives legislators a way to, if a pandemic hits and they have to spend more money or whatever happens, they can do it on a temporary basis. It will not affect future years. It will not allow them to lock us into spending for future years, because the next year, that expenditure limit is not going to reset based on what we actually spent. It's going to reset based on the lower of what we actually spent or what we should have actually spent, the maximum. So it would go back to the previous year's expenditure limit that we busted. So you would not lock in the spending increase from year to year, because we know once government, this is all government. I don't care if it's a Republican government, a Democrat government, a libertarian government, any government, maybe not a libertarian government. They may actually do a good job. We'll see, maybe one day. But any government will lock in spending. If they spend it one year, they're going to spend it the next year. It's very rare you see a government budget shrink, especially on a state level. They always increase. What this would do is to seek to stop that, and to whatever degree it's allowed to continue, it's only allowed to continue at the camera mirroring is off. So as I move my hand right, it moves left on my screen. But right. It only allows to grow at a very small percentage each year rather than the maximum. So open the floodgate of questions for me.
All right, so I got a comment on that. Isn't the dirty little secret about government spending, especially in the state of Louisiana, that when they talk about cuts, it's cuts to increases? You know, most people think about it, if let's say the budget is $100 and you're going to cut the budget, then you would drop the budget down to, I don't know, let's just say $99. But the truth is, if the budget's $100 one year, they're going to run it up to $14 the next year, cut it $1 to $13, and tell you they saved you money somehow. Isn't that basically it in a nutshell?
Yes, a small increase is a cut to these folks. I guess that means that I could ask for a raise, and if it's not a big enough raise, I could complain to my boss. I don't know. It doesn't really work in the real world that way. It's not how budgeting works in anybody's family, anybody's business. It does in government for whatever reason, I think, but that's what they try to pass off. That's what the headline from the Times-Picayune tried to say, was that we were going to have drastic cuts, when in reality we were going to have an almost 5% increase in the size of the state government that year. That's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. When people see those types of headlines and then they read the articles, I guess they're trying to gaslight us, is what I think, make us believe that what we think is true and real isn't. But I think this is a great amendment, and I hope y'all will all vote yes on 4.
All right, so I got one other comment too, and Duke, I'm sure you may want to interject here in a second, of course, but we keep growing the government, but here's my easy way to understand this, without getting way down in the weeds. Our state's not really growing. As a matter of fact, our year over year from 2018 to 2019 is actually about 100,000, give or take a few, loss in population. So why does the government continue to grow? And I'm asking this rhetorically, John, of course, but why does the government continue to grow even though our population is, for all intents and purposes, flatlined?
I'll give you a rhetorical yes, I agree with you.
Okay. Just making sure I wasn't just completely crazy.
No, you're not. You're not crazy at all. some of these other things are increasing, right? So it's becoming more and more expensive to buy things. We're making more on average until the pandemic hit. By a little bit, we're making more as individuals in the state. We're producing more as a state. That's how economies work. Even when we're growing or shrinking. And I don't know if that makes any sense. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense in real terms, but we may be shrinking as a share of what's happening nationally, but we're still growing as a state. We're just not growing as fast as the other states are. So there's a justification that state government should be allowed to grow each year. You're not going to hear me make that point, but others would make the point. This, again, doesn't say that you can't spend more on a year-to-year basis. It just says you have to do it in a way that makes at least some degree of sense for change.
Gotcha. And y'all, I think y'all will be glad to know Miss Ann's keeping an eye on us to making sure that we agree with Jeff Sato or he agrees with us. So,
in regards to governments and budgets and the like, and it's been my experience that typically governments start their year off with a budget based off of the previous year, and the previous year budget, if they got into the end of the year and they had monies left over, they were either instructed or they found a way to spend that money. So therefore, the next year, they wouldn't ask for a budget that was less. Somehow or another, it's my opinion, we've got to get, departments of state and local governments out of that mindset to, look, turn it back over, send it back to the taxpayers. If you're not going to use it and you don't need it, not continually increase your budget over and over and over again. And I know for a fact that happens, and I always, it perplexes me as to how nobody seems to really get down in the weeds in some of the departments in state government.
Well, I can answer part of that maybe, and of course this is going to be one of my little snarky replies, but our legislators pull on the heartstrings. So they make people try to vote by emotion, not by logic, and the math never lies. But they'll come in and say, just like John mentioned earlier, oh, well, we're going to have these drastic cuts in services. If we don't increase the budget that they're really increasing, they're just trying to slightly cut the increase, and they don't even want to do that. So they try to pull on everybody's heartstrings, and all these services are going to come to a screeching halt. We're not going to have LSU football anymore, blah, blah, blah. And that's how they do it.
Oh boy, LSU football.
We won't get on that yet. But, yeah. Okay, so we're ready to move on to the next one, or more questions, or?
I'm ready for the next one.
Okay. So let me switch over here. So we just got through number 4. Let me scroll down in this handy little pocket edition here. It says, do you support an amendment to authorize local governments to enter into cooperative endeavor ad valorem tax exemption agreements with new or expanding manufacturing establishments for payments in lieu of taxes? Simplify that for us.
So a lot of people who I like a lot like this amendment. And I like the idea of the amendment. What it does is it says that when you open a new business in a parish or a taxing authority, that you can enter into a deal with that taxing authority that says even if you're exempt from paying taxes the first 10 years because you got an ITEP, Industrial Tax Exemption Program, and to encourage you to move to that parish, they said you don't have to pay any taxes, property taxes to us for 10 years to help offset your operating expenses. What this would do was it would create a pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, that would allow that company to pay taxes on the front end and say, we know we don't owe taxes the first 10 years, but we're going to pay some of our next 15 years taxes now and make a deal with the local government. The deal could be any number of things. It could be, we want to have a road built to our facility, so we're going to pay the following 15 years of taxes early in exchange for you building a road to our facility. It sounds good in theory, and it's very well intended. and I am not a hard no on this. I'm more or less a soft no because I can see some of the virtue in it. But I can see a lot of opportunity for this to be misused by local government. I can see sweetheart deals being passed down from from the assessor to his brother-in-law. I can see deals that don't ever come to fruition. I can see a situation where the state or the local government tries to anticipate what the company's going to have to pay for the next 25 years, which, by the way, this is a 25-year cap. Can't go any longer than that on the deal. To where they try to imagine what the property tax, what the tax is going to look like, what the value of the business is going to look like over the next 25 years. Work out a deal for them to pay that 15 years that they do have to pay taxes for. And then it turns out at the end of the day, they've paid a lot less than they should have paid, which I'm all for paying less in taxes. But I'm not for paying less in taxes on the back of someone else. I'm not for giving sweetheart deals to people. I'm for a tax code that treats everyone the same. That is a good conservative mindset to have when you talk about tax policy. I don't think that this necessarily does. I don't think that it necessarily doesn't do that. But when you leave it open-ended and you allow people to make these types of decisions that are could be ripe for corruption, could be ripe for just not understanding how to do your job correctly or count. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So at the current time, I could be persuaded on this one if I'm missing something, but I've watched the hearings. I don't think I'm missing anything. I could be persuaded to vote yes on this one. But if I were voting today, which I meant to, and I didn't, so I got to now go later in the week, which is going to be a ton of fun, I'm sure. I would probably vote no on this one, but I'm not. This is the one that I'm just not locked in yet, but I'm leaning towards.
John, the thing that comes to mind for me is free markets and government picking winners and losers. Would that in your mind be an accurate description?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I don't think that's what they are seeking to do, but I think that's the unintended consequence of the bill.
Yeah, that was my take on it. Additionally, the LAGOP, took no position on it. I think they were, indifferent. I will point out that the local Bossier PEC voted to endorse that, with the exception of a few no votes.
I wonder who they could have been.
I wonder.
Wait just a minute. Let me make sure that I heard you correctly, Duke. The Bossier PEC, Republican Executive Committee, voted yes on that amendment?
They voted yes on that amendment.
Really?
I can't give you all who voted in favor of that one, but I can tell you who voted against it.
Well, I'm pretty sure I know one or two at least.
Yeah, yours truly was one. Mike Collier was the other. John Dalton Griffin and John Burns. Basically we kind of took the positions that government didn't need to be picking winners and losers.
Well, I want to go down that rabbit hole for just a second because obviously I've got the CATOPEC's recommendation up here for amendment number 5, and their recommendation is no as well. I think we're all three pretty much in agreement, and if Miss Ann's listening, I'm sure she's got Jeff Sato's deal up there. But again, the reddest parish in the state, basically, the Republican committee for this parish basically said yes to this amendment.
Now, I am going to invoke Ryan Gaddy here. I'm going to invoke Ryan Gaddy here. Ryan Gaddy described a district over here as being purple one time to me. I'm not so sure about the red.
He might have been correct. Okay, well, I'll stay out of that rabbit hole for now because I know we've got a lot more on that. So are we ready to move on? Let me throw this one comment up here from Terry Adams, so it may take it a second to show on y'all's screen if you can read it. Terry says, Louisiana has never been favorable towards small business in regards to tax breaks. It seems only the corp giants ever benefit. So,
amen to that.
I'm for a tax system in Louisiana that taxes Walmart the same as it taxes Straws. I think they should pay the same thing as far as percentages are concerned. It should be low flat fare, and they shouldn't be able to hire a ton of CPAs to figure their way out of it.
I knew there was a reason I liked you so much, John. Amen, brother. All right, so let's move on to Amendment 6. I'll do the honors of reading it here. Amendment number 6, do you support an amendment to increase the maximum amount of income a person may receive and still qualify for the special assessment level for residential property receiving the homestead exemption?
This is just one of those that I'm going to have to say no to. What it does is it takes the income level. So in Louisiana, backing up, people over the age of 65 have the ability to lock their assessments of their property in for the rest of their lives. So if your property is assessed at XYZ, and when you turn 65, you can lock it in and make sure that it never goes up. And the thinking behind it is people who lived on fixed incomes, et cetera, can have more predictability in what they're paying as far as property taxes are concerned. Everyone who's eligible for that has to make $77,000 a year or less. What this would do is it would increase that number to $100,000. This is not an inflationary increase. When this was first passed, it was passed at $50,000. And over the years, inflation has brought it up to $77,000 since the early 2000s. So it's not like it's been locked in for many years and it's just time to change it for inflation's sake. It's been changed for inflation's sake. This is just a nod to artificially changing a tax base that shouldn't artificially be changed. If the assessments are too high, the property taxes are too high, then people need to work within their local governments to change that. But the state of Louisiana coming in and continuing to put more and more rules on local governments and how they can tax, how they can collect taxes. Because remember, this is a parish tax, property taxes are. The state of Louisiana doesn't have a property tax in that when you buy a house, you pay property tax on it to the state government. You only pay to the parish governments in Louisiana. This is just the state coming in and again telling local governments what they can or can't do whenever it comes to that taxation. They've already done it when it comes to the homestead exemption in the first place, around $75,000, I believe. But now they're putting more and more layers on top of that, including more people in the exemptions or in the reductions. And again, I'm all for paying less in taxes, but when you start to treat one for one reason, you're headed pretty quickly down a slippery slope that you could make an argument to treat a lot of tax bases differently that own property or whatever, own whatever, or take part in whatever activity. Whereas it's just much simpler and much more friendly to everyone if you just have one rate that everyone who owns a property knows they're going to have to pay.
All right, so we're a no on Amendment 6 then, correct?
I am, and this isn't one of those things that's a major revenue change. I don't think that any local governments would experience a major difference. This is more of a principle vote for me. Let's just fix the system rather than continuing to damage.
I would agree, and I want to circle back to number 5 for a minute, and this wouldn't be the first time that I have not agreed with Jeff Sato, but according to Miss Ann, and I just looked it up, he said yes on 5. Jeff Sato did. Now, like I said, the Catopec agreed with us on a no on number 5, and I wholeheartedly say no to it. So, all right, so I'm going to mark us down as a no on number 6 as well. Duke, do you have any feedback on that?
No, I'll say two things. I think that this amendment will probably pass simply because of the wording. It's pretty detailed and technical, and when you see the keywords, disabled veterans, military, and I'm looking at the amendment. We start seeing things like that. It almost, if you really don't dig deep in it, comes across as, trying to do something for specific groups of people, and a lot of people are going to vote for it just simply, because of that reason and to feel good. Again, I wish, I mean, I know things have to get on as constitutional amendments, but I wish the legislature would do a little bit more work on some of these things rather than kicking them back to the citizens.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. All right, so let's move on. So I've got us down as pretty much all three in agreement and no on number 6. Number 7 says, do you support an amendment to create the Louisiana Unclaimed Property Permanent Trust Fund to preserve the money that remains unclaimed by its owner or owners? So John, you want to break this one down for us?
Yeah, I'm going to be for this one as well. What this does, it deals with the state treasurer, John Schroeder's current state treasurer. He oversees a program called the Unclaimed Property Program. And what that is if you overpay your electric company or you overpay on a mortgage and you sell the house and they can't find you to return the money, they send it to the state government. The state holds it in escrow with your name on it. And you can log onto the website, you can type your name, your information in, look yourself up, try to see if you have any unclaimed property, unclaimed money. They'll send you a check for it. What currently happens is,
I'll be honest.
If in a given year the unclaimed property brings in more dollars than it sends out, then that money can be taken and used in the state general fund. It can be spent on whatever. Now, if the owner of the money ever comes calling for the money, they have to give it back. So this is robbing Peter to pay Paul with the hopes that Peter never comes home. It's worked so far in that there have only been 2 times in history that the unclaimed property fund has run out of money, and they eventually paid the money back. In a typical year, there's more money coming in than going out. So it worked, but it's a pyramid scheme essentially. What this would do is it would say, if we have someone else's money that we owe to them, we're going to treat it that way, and we're not going to spend it on something else. What we're going to do is we're going to take the money, the treasurer would take the money that's in the fund, and he would invest it in stocks, bonds, and try to earn interest on it. He would keep the principal in escrow. So if you came looking for the money, it would be there. But any of the extra money that is earned by the investment could then go to the state general fund. So basically, it's the state saying, we're going to hold your money for you until you can find it. And in the meantime, we're going to earn interest on it that we keep. So we'll hold it for you. The charge is that you're not making interest on it. The real argument for this is that the state government is becoming, and particularly to John Schroeder's credit, becoming much, much better about paying this money back out to who it came from. They've done a great job in the treasurer's office of setting up a system where they are able to more accurately find the people who are owed the money, publicize the system using social media and other things, and get the money back to its rightful owners. It wasn't necessarily paid that much attention. Now it's been a real priority of John Schroeder's office. They've done a good job. And the argument is that they're going to continue to do a better job, find better ways to do it. More in the future, the state's going to be likely to run into a position where they don't have Peter's money. They've already given it to Paul, and Peter's going to have to wait until more comes in. So they're going to continue down this 6 cycle of taking one person's money, spending it somewhere else, and not being able to pay that money back.
So I'm going to put us down as a yes for number 7, and I agree with that. Interestingly enough, my wife and I both had some unclaimed money. It wasn't much. It was like $50 or something like that. But when Schroeder and John Bell got into their little tit for tat over this, I was like, you know what, let me go on there and see if we have anything. And lo and behold, like I said, it was like $50 or something. I can't even remember what it was for. But yeah, we had unclaimed money sitting there.
I wish I had some.
Rob and Peter. Wow. It's a blast from the past.
All right. What do we have? One, or Duke, if you got any feedback. If not, I guess we'll take a quick look at the sports wagering in the parish of Caddo. Are we voting on that one, or is that Caddo only?
Everybody.
Everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
So the amendment says, or proposition says, shall sports wagering activities and operations be permitted in the parish of Caddo?
So it's a proposition by the legislature. They did it a couple years ago on fantasy sports betting. What this would do is say, if you want to bet on a football game, a basketball game, whatever, that you can do that if your parish votes to legalize it. So this is essentially a proposition that's on parish's ballot. So Caddo may vote for it while Bossier votes against it. You could sports bet in Caddo, you couldn't in Bossier. You don't have to go to a casino to do it. You can do it on an online app. So you could have half the parishes say yes, half of them say no, all of them say no, all of them say yes, or any combination of yes and no across the state. And then once this is passed in a parish or parishes as a whole, to the state government for them to decide what the rules are going to be around it. So geofencing around a parish, how you can prove where you are, where you live, and how the state's going to tax the income from it, from that app or service or however you gamble. So the arguments on each side of this one are, on the one side, you have people saying this is revenue that we're missing out on as a state, that we could be bringing this in and using it to pay our bills or for whatever reason that person sees as useful. On the other hand, you have people who are arguing against it from a moral basis and saying, we already have too much gambling in the state of Louisiana. We don't need more gambling. And then you have people like me who sit in the middle and say, the government shouldn't tell you what you can and can't do with your money unless it's illicitly illegal and harmful to other people. So you can't use it to buy guns and then go kill everyone that you see on the street. What the government should say is, listen, if you want to spend your money betting on a sports team, go for it. You're probably going to lose. That's why those apps and casinos exist. But we're going to give you the freedom and liberty to do what it is you want with your dollars. So there are three sides to it. I happen to fall in the third one, where do what you want with your money.
I'd have to agree again that I fall in that as, quote unquote conservative as I am. If it's a sin, that's between you and God. But I agree with you that it shouldn't be the government defining morality. In most cases, matter of fact, almost all cases. But anyway, all right, so we're going to say we're a yes on this one. Duke, do you have some feedback on this?
Yeah, I do have a question and a clarification on this particular issue and vote. And if I understand it correctly, this is by parish. Every parish in the state is voting on it. And so just so the followers of our show understand, so for example, it may pass the majority of parishes across the state. That doesn't mean that the betting will be allowed in every parish in the state. So if I'm correct on that, so let's say, for instance, Caddo passes it and Bossier doesn't. That would mean you could go do this kind of gambling in Caddo, but then you couldn't do it in Bossier, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, because I had this question posed to me the other day, and I wasn't 100% sure on it, and because folks were talking about the number of casinos that were technically in Bossier and in Caddo, and the argument as it relates to if you were a voter in Bossier, that if you voted against this, people would just go to Caddo and do it, and Caddo would simply get all of the proceeds. Take the moral question out of it, but just take the monetary question, and you would basically just be exporting the proceeds from it over the river.
Well, let me throw in my little 2 cents from a tech perspective. They don't even have to drive across the river if it's an online app. geofencing or not, that's very, very easy for most, even non-technical people that do a little bit of Googling to get around. So you're right, it's exporting the money across the river, and they don't even have to drive across the river to do it.
It's already legal in Mississippi. So it's not like this is new to our area. Mississippi was actually, they passed a law a couple of years ago, and a Supreme Court case came down right afterwards that made it legal. So they were first to touch on it. Of course, we've been slow to the sports betting bonanza nationally. I don't think it's going to mean anything or much to the state coffers, and it would be state dollars, not parish dollars. I don't think it would mean much to the state coffers. It's not about that for me.
All right, so I'm going to put us down, Duke, make sure you agree. I'm going to put us down as a yes for the sports wagering authorization.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, if a person wants to go and gamble, they already have all of the options to go and gamble. You know, I hardly believe that this is going to make a difference in changing anything.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is here in the next, well, probably be sometime tomorrow since we have early voting going on, I'm going to go down through these amendments and do something with an official Bossier Watch post listing what we came up with during this. And John, I want to thank you a whole lot, of course, for getting down in the weeds in this, because it really is in the weeds on some of these amendments. And we'll publish out, you know, ours, which pretty close match up to Caddo's actually. So anyway.
So back to the hat. I want to know, what is that logo on that hat?
So in about 3 minutes, the Dallas Cowboys are going to play football on television, and this is a retro Dallas Cowboys logo. So
let's see if I can zoom in there.
Oh my gosh.
That's it. We're cutting him off.
That's it. That's it.
About to start.
We needed to vet that before we got this show started.
That's right. What kind of guests are you inviting on here, Duke?
That's my fault. That's my fault.
Well,
But
hey, Rex, you're gonna have.
I did see him wearing a Make America Great hat the other day, so he's come a long way.
That makes up for it.
Yep. Listen, Rex, you're going to have to teach me a few things about fishing. I've watched some of your videos, and it looks like you may have better advice than Duke's had for me recently.
Well, there is a little secret to that. That on some of those videos, I didn't even show all the fish I caught. I had a really good day, but some of those videos, it took like 3 or 4 days for me to find the fish to get them. But yeah, we need to go. I hadn't been really that much in the last couple of weeks. I was talking about that earlier with Duke. So yeah, next time you're up this way or something like that, holler at me, and maybe we'll all 3 go or something like that and see if we can go find
Well,
something.
I don't know. I guess you don't know it. I live back in town now, so I moved back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I actually live. I can see it right here. I live on Cross Lake. I know you're a Caddo guy, though.
Yeah. Well, you know, most of us around here have kind of a love-hate relationship with Cross Lake. A lot of people call it the Dead Sea, and sometimes it is. But the truth is, Cross has got a bunch of big fish in it too, and you know, it's just kind of peculiar. A lot of people don't realize how shallow Cross Lake actually is. At the bridge, yeah, it's only 10, 11 feet deep at the bridge, underneath those pilings, and so it doesn't have the structure that, you know, you would think with a deeper impoundment, because it's really fairly shallow and it's just a little bit different. But yeah, we need to go sometime. I didn't realize you were back.
Yeah, we moved back in June.
Awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong, don't y'all have a relatively new baby?
Yeah, we have a almost 2-year-old little girl, and we just announced on Saturday that we have twin little girls on the way. So I've got my hands full.
Ooh, I can appreciate that. I have twins who are 21 years old, and trust me, they're still a handful. That's like a never-ending deal. So.
How about that? Sure. I have 14 years.
Right. Just the twin Facebook Alive.
Yeah.
How
Okay.
about that?
Anything else y'all can think of to?
No,
I appreciate
John, we
y'all.
appreciate it as usual. You were enlightening on all of these amendments, and I hope that everybody watching that helps them, decide, and I hope they appreciate it as much as I do.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a good night.
All right. See you later, John. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, Duke, hold on. Let me get his stuff out of the way here. And I'm going to rearrange us a little here with my cool new graphics. Look at that. Isn't that just cool?
You are amazing.
Hey, I didn't design the software. I'm just trying to run it. That's all.
So for the first time in this show, I'm able to actually see the video.
Yeah, it went fairly well. There's a lot of variables in it, not just, on the software end, but we also have to deal with, your connection, your device, everybody else is like, John's phone or his computer and his connection. So there's a lot of variables. But yeah, it went much smoother tonight. So hopefully the future episodes will go, or future shows will go fairly smooth too.
Yeah, and we want to kind of talk about some of the future. I mean, we've gotten some emails and texts and people sharing a little information about some things going on in the parish, and we've got some future guests that are going to come on and share a little information and insight.
Yeah, I've got one that kind of surprised me, and of course I won't mention any names with this at the request of these folks, but you and I have been talking about the Republican PEC. Of course, I've been on the Cypress District Board and all that, but of all places, it appears there might be a little controversy at the public library.
The library?
I mean, I thought you just went to the library to read books, or these days maybe use a computer or something, or go early vote, but it appears there's something. I know I haven't really dug into it yet, and I don't know if you have, and we don't want to disclose too much because there might not be anything to it. But it appears in Bossier Parish there is even some controversy with the library system.
That's amazing. Who would have thought that the library of all things, but taxpayer dollars. So,
well, and I'm not going to mention any names or spoil anything, but interestingly enough, it seems to be some of the same names that we see quite frequently. I'll just leave it at that.
Wow. Common names. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Well, as you and I have kind of talked, and I won't throw any names, we've got some hopeful congressmen that may be going to come on that are running for office. And we've also got some current elected federal officials, that intend to bless us with their presence and talk a little bit about the state of things, and we look forward to that, as well as, like you said, the library. Man, you got me tongue twisted here. The library.
Who would have thought at the library? So, like I said, we'll see. Full disclosure, I haven't dug into it. I'm not sure if you have yet, but we've been contacted, and apparently there's more than one person, and just things going on.
I'm froze up, so it looks like it's time for us to go. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can still hear you if you unfreeze, but we'll go ahead and close it out, and we'll see everybody on the next show.
So with that, if you can still hear me, I'll sign off and say, go Tigers.